Good day. It's Thursday, September the 16th. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. Today, we've got CEO Michael McFadden of Alpha Cognition on the call with us. Alpha Cognition is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company dedicated to developing treatments for underserved neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, dementia, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. I've got Alpha Cognition on the call today for a few reasons. I have generally a strong interest in brain health and brain diseases, so any opportunity I have to learn about that on the treatment side is interesting to me, and also hopeful given how horrible degenerative brain diseases are. And if we can get any closer to fixing that in the world, we'll all be much happier for it. Also, Alpha Cognition began trading this spring and is still a relatively unknown entity, so it's good to get the word out. And they've got some research covered from Raymond James, giving me comfort that they have a legitimate shot in this high-risk world of biotech. Remember, this is neither a recommendation or investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Do your own due diligence and come to your own investment conclusions. Michael, thanks for joining us today, and let's hear your story.
Martin, thanks so much. We're excited to tell about the company and all the advancements we have going on in all of our clinical programs. I will share some forward-looking statements, so please consult this slide on playback for the implications of those throughout the conversation today. Here's an overview of the company. We're focused in CNS disease. We're trying to tackle three of the hardest, but I'll share with you our path toward approval, which I think modulates risk for investors. And you'll see the opportunity that emerges before us with our lead program. That's Alpha 1062. So it's a patented new treatment that we're seeking approval for mild to moderate Alzheimer's dementia. We formulated this drug to be a best-in-class treatment. We've optimized three issues that occur with other drugs in the therapeutic area. One is it's very hard to get people to therapeutic dose, a dose that'll work for them. Number two, lots of patients suffer from side effects. So their turnover of patients being treated for Alzheimer's is very, very high. And then third, everybody wants long-term outcomes. They want to ameliorate disease or stop symptomatology that's derailing for patients and their caregivers. And we think we've optimized our drug to do just that. I'll explain why momentarily. The market
Michael, sorry, it starts with my interrupting here. So you said it's hard to give patients enough of a dose. Is that because it has bad side effects, or they've got like a bowl of pills to eat if they need to take it? What are the limiting factors to them taking the appropriate dosage?
It's most commonly side effects. So all of the drugs in the what we call an ACHEI, it's acetylcholinesterase inhibitor class, have pretty substantive side effects. And if you look at the quant data in that class, there's about 30% turnover by month 4 of treatment, and only half patients remain on therapy by end of first year. It's primarily due to side effects. The side effects are typically nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting. And as a patient's titrated up, those side effects can continue over a window of time. So imagine, Martin, you have a loved one with Alzheimer's, you're caring for them. So you're doing the heavy lift there. They're throwing up every time they take their pill. You may tolerate and manage that for a few days, but if it continues, you're calling your doctor back probably to say, hey, I need something that my loved one can stay on. And that we see that as the case with most of the agents that are out there. In fact, the discontinuation rates are no different, irrespective of the agent.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. Now, Alzheimer's, I get reactions on the Alzheimer's space of really challenging area, graveyard of failure. How are you guys going to get approval? So we've taken a de-risk 505(b)(2) path toward approval, and we've supplemented that program with a tolerability differentiation study. I'll explain the 505(b)(2). That is a bioequivalence path toward approval. And then we're supplementing tolerability data to show differentiation with our drug and the other drugs in the market. I'll go through the detail on that momentarily. Our patents extend past 2040, so we got a long life to commercialize the asset. Let me skip the next two sections and I'll talk about them in depth here on this slide. First is pipeline. Are we a one product company? No, we've got 4 clinical programs ongoing. Alpha 1062 for mild to moderate is our first. Our second is Alpha 1062 plus memantine. It's a combination for moderate to severe Alzheimer's. Our hope is if we get both of those programs approved by the agency, we can compete from diagnosis all the way to end of life to help patients and give physicians another treatment arm. The third program that we have is a mild traumatic brain injury study that we're using alpha 1062 intranasally. So it's pushed through the nose straight to the brain. And there's a thought that our drug can reduce brain inflammation that occurs with concussion or any type of mild traumatic brain injury, and also provide cognitive clearing through the receptors that it modulates. And there are last.
And would that be just through like a nasal spray, or is it more surgical where they really go?
No, it's a drug device combination. So a small device, and you push it much like you would, not Afrin, but it's akin to something like that you would use for rhinitis. The last program we have we're really excited about is progranulin, which is a protein gene therapy approach for ALS. Progranulin is one of the most exciting areas in CNS. There are multiple companies in the space. Our approach is a bit different. We're taking an AAV vector 9 approach to oversaturate ALS patients with progranulin. We believe that could be curative, but we have a long way to go, and we'll have our first data readout on that program first quarter of next year. So a bit about the Alzheimer's market. If you don't know or haven't been affected with a friend or a loved one, it's probably rare. About 6 million people who suffer from disease in the US alone. Tremendous amount of money spent, almost $400 billion. Of note, 8 out of 10 persons who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's were started on acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. So we're a new generation, new class of acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Almost all patients are started on these drugs. It's standard of care. Now, the turnover is really high. I mentioned that earlier. Only half of patients remain on those therapies into first year. We think that offers opportunity for new innovation. Now, what is our... Yeah.
Sorry, going back to the standard of care right now, what does it slow the disease, or what is it? There's no cure, but it just slows the progression of it?
It modifies symptomatology. So most of the patients with Alzheimer's go to their doctor because they notice they can't remember things, or they're forgetting things to the point that it impacts daily functioning. Yeah. And so these drugs ameliorate those symptoms or reduce those symptoms so that the patient can have a more normal functioning for a longer window of time. They do not stop disease. Disease continues to progress, and most of the physicians tell us they either have to modify therapy or increase dose over time to try to maintain that functioning for patients.
Does it delay the entire sort of degenerative process of Alzheimer's dementia, or does it kind of slow it down and they kind of hit a point in time where it really drops off and it sort of accelerates and they're back on the same sort of path?
So it's a really good question. It's a really challenging one to answer, and here's why. A lot of patients have suffered from either mild cognitive impairment before they're diagnosed for a window of time, or they actually have Alzheimer's for a window of time before they're treated. So we do know if you catch the disease early, your chance of more normal functioning is improved. If you catch it later, as the patient's digressing, they may slide into moderate or severe Alzheimer's very quickly. It's really hard to quantify that across all patient populations because they're coming into treatment at different times. And the types of treatment that they're on are different. Now, we do know, and I'll share some data with our drug, that it has shown ability to reduce progression of disease in a very, very large study. So we're really excited about that study and digging into the data. I'll talk about that in just a minute.
One other sort of side note for sort of baseline information. What is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia, or Alzheimer's dementia? Because they're different are they synonymous, or what is Alzheimer's versus dementia?
Think dementia as a broad umbrella, and Alzheimer's is a type of dementia under that umbrella. There are many other types of dementia. Frontotemporal dementia is an example. Parkinson's dementia is another. Many types of dementias under that broad dementia bucket.
Gotcha. And do they understand the mechanisms of action or whatever? Because they're still wrestling with how Alzheimer's works, and like there are the plaque or whatever in the brain, and so forth. So there is a basic model, and are you sort of formulated the drug to sort of somehow interact and sort of lessen the impact of the plaques, or?
Our drug may have some impact on inflammation of the brain, and many experts will say Alzheimer's is a disease of inflammation. Our drug also modulates memory acquisition. I'll talk about the receptors that it touches and why that is. Most of the drugs in this class just modulate acetylcholine. They increase acetylcholine in a synapse of the brain. They have no other receptor functionality. So our drug is quite unique in that regard.
All right, I'll let you keep going. Thank you.
No, it's great questions. So what is our drug? So alpha 1062 is a prodrug of galantamine. It's been formulated to decrease all the side effects that occur with galantamine and increase bioavailability. That's the amount of drug that operates in the brain. Now, you may ask, what is galantamine? Galantamine was approved back in 2000s by Johnson & Johnson. It was on the market for several years. The drug never reached full potential, primarily because the side effects were derailing. So the galantamine has about 45% side effects. Patients throw up with the drug. It's very challenging to get them to dose. That said, if doctors could get patients to dose with the drug, and it was a small minority of patients, they actually fared very well. So the efficacy data is quite good with galantamine, hence the work that's been done to try to get drug into brain and remove some of the rate limiting side effects that the drug has. So we did that with a formulation of a benzyl ester to eliminate acetylcholine inhibition. And we added a gluconate salt to increase solubility. We coated that in an enteric coated tablet so that drug is released when it's supposed to be released. So here's how it works. Take drug, it's a pill. It drops into the GI tract, and our alpha 1062 is absorbed in the small intestine, but it's inactive. It exerts no effect in the intestine. Now, it's important because you have acetylcholine in your intestine. You actually have it in many organs in your body. The fact that our drug exerts no activity reduces the GI side effects that are seen with the other drugs. It then is metabolized in the liver. And when it's metabolized in the liver, that benzyl ester is cleaved, and it results in the release of galantamine into the brain. And it does so with about 15% greater bioavailability, which is great because you need less drug to do same activity. Now, here's how it works in the gut. So this is a blown up picture of your intestine, and this orange line is your intestinal wall. When you take any of the drugs, other drugs on the market, so these would be drugs like Aricept or Exelon, they bind very strongly to acetylcholinesterase. And when they do, there's neurons in your intestinal wall, and it overstimulates those neurons. And that results in an excess of diarrhea, vomiting, or nausea for the patient. And as you take more doses, that value can increase or accumulate, meaning that those side effects could be with the patient for a window of time. Now, our drug is on the right side, alpha 1062. It's also absorbed into the intestinal wall, but it's inert. So there's no release of drug or overstimulation of those neurons, meaning no diarrhea, nausea, vomiting. In fact, we've seen no GI side effects with our drug at starting and therapeutic doses to date.
And how your drug is different, it's because you talked about being a bioequivalent. So you're taking the same drug, but you're attaching it to a couple other molecules or coating it or whatever. Right. So it doesn't have the same side effects, but will then still get into the bloodstream and still have the same efficacy that the current drug has, but without the horrible side effects.
You're correct.
Okay.
Exactly. And what is amazing about galantamine as an agent is it has multi-mode of function. So it inhibits acetylcholinesterase, increasing acetylcholine in this synapse of your brain. So this is a normal brain. You and I have acetylcholine bouncing around in our synapse. That's what helps us remember things and know how to do certain activities. Our daily functions normal. In an Alzheimer's patient, these little yellow dots are reduced. There's a lot less of them. There's less pushed into the synapse, and there's less caught by these postsynaptic receptors. And so the end result is that functioning for those patients decreases. So what our drug does is it modulates both receptors to increase acetylcholine in the synapse of the brain. But more importantly, it impacts allosterically a receptor called alpha-7 nicotinic receptors. And alpha-7 nicotinic receptors are really important because they've been shown to modulate inflammation, to buffer some of the effects of amyloid, and most importantly, they have downstream effects on many other receptors like glutamate, serotonin, GABA, dopamine, and that receptor activity has been shown to be responsible for memory acquisition, attention, and stabilization of behavior. In fact, we've seen that in the patient studies that have been done. So it's unique in that regard of how it acts in the brain. And the alpha-7 nicotinic receptor is a really important receptor to impact because of the many effects that has downstream in the brain. Really important. Now, from a approval process, I mentioned earlier, we have a de-risk path to approval, and that's a bioequivalence study. So here's what we have to show the FDA to obtain approval for our drug. We have to show equivalence with our comparator drug. This is galantamine or razidine with AUC, that's area under the curve, and Cmax within a ratio of 20%. So 80 to 125, we show bioequivalence. We can submit an NDA package to the agency for approval. Now, we've already demonstrated that in 2 formulations, a sublingual and an enteric-coated tablet. Our pivotal trial will be to do the same work with only enteric-coated tablet in a larger patient set. So we'll need to replicate this data, and if we do, we have an approvable drug. Now, this is the trial. It's a standard trial, very prescriptive by the FDA, and you have a food and fasted arm for our drug and a food and fasted arm for galantamine. And then you screen the patient, you dose them, you draw blood, do bioanalysis, and they measure AUC Cmax within the bioequivalence constraints the FDA has required, about 30 persons per arm to minimize variability. And that study will start this quarter and will complete end of year. So we'll be releasing top-line data on that study in Q1.
So how do you detect if it's working? Are you looking sort of for, when you get into all the molecules, I have a hard time, I'm not the science guy on that, and maybe you said this, but how do you detect if it's working or if it's, are there chemical markers, or are you looking at how the patient, if there are cognitive issues, sort of slow down their degeneration, or how do you
looking at that in this study? We'll only be looking at these pharmacokinetic parameters, the AUC and Cmax. So this is not an efficacy study, hence the de-risking aspect of our study. The FDA acknowledges our drug is equal to galantamine in the brain. And so they've said galantamine's already proven efficacy, in fact, quite good efficacy. So we need not reprove that. It's validated by the agency, our drug is galantamine. So, meaning we don't have to complete an efficacy study.
Or a phase 3, is that what you mean by an efficacy study?
It would actually be, if we did full program, 2 phase 3s, $70 million, 4 or 5 year study. We don't have to do that because of the acknowledgement by the agency that we have equivalence. We just have to prove that we have equivalence.
Looking at those parameters, those PK parameters.
Exactly right. Yeah.
All right.
So it's a very de-risk path to drug approval. About 15% of the drugs in the US take this path. And most of the drugs that do supplement their package with other data, and we're doing the same thing, and we're supplementing with this type of data. And that's so the first trial you did was strictly on the safety, the side effects, and the side effects on the initial trials were minimal. And then that was, call it, let's say, a phase 1 for lack of a better term. This program, by the way, has done full preclinical phase 1A, phase 1B work. So there have been about 50 studies completed on the product for toxicity, safety, tolerability, utilization, dosing, etc.
Gotcha. And then this one is just looking to see how it hits those markers. And so this is the efficacy, the efficacy.
Bioequivalence.
Bioequivalence, excuse me. Okay. And I don't know, am I jumping the gun here? What is the FDA path after that? Or do you want to talk to this slide and get to that?
No, I can talk about it here. The FDA path to that is we complete a package. Now that package will have all of our studies in there. It's a huge package. So they'll have your tox, safety, dosing, everything in there. When we complete that NDA package, and we will submit that in Q3 of next year, and that starts the clock for approval. That's a 10-month review by the agency for approval. Okay. Yeah. All so right, our approval would be the first half of 2023.
And so you're getting the top line data in Q1 of 2022?
Correct, from this study.
Yeah, and then we'll see more detailed data, let's say in Q2 of next year. And then
you would see our file go into the agency, which would mean all of our detailed data is deemed submittable to the agency.
Gotcha. So you go from top line data, then you're quiet for a while, and then you submit the package to the FDA.
You're correct.
Did you say in Q3?
Yes, early Q3.
Early Q3. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great questions. Now we're supplementing that package with patient data. So we need to demonstrate, again, in a larger patient group, that our drug has placebo-like effects. We think that is so differentiating for this class of drugs. So we'll set about to do a patient study where we dose patients on drug at various doses, and we compare that, in our case, likely to placebo, to demonstrate placebo-like effects. Now, we've demonstrated that with an early study where alpha 1062 was dosed, and we showed 0 side effects. So this is a above a starting dose, a therapeutic dose of drug. We've shown no side effects because it's probably because it doesn't hit the GI tract. Now, for comparative purposes, it's not a comparative study, but comparative purposes, Razidine did the same thing. And in a single dose, starting dose, not a therapeutic dose, just a starting dose, 28% of patients had side effects first dose. And if they multi-dose the patients, that went up to 45%. So we'll seek to demonstrate this type of data and then file with the agency a change in label for side effect differences. And we're also going to file for MOA because it's so differentiating for the compound. And also we hope to be able to file reduction in dosing to get to a therapeutic dose, which would be meaningful to physicians. And that work will go through 2022, and then will be submitted at or immediately following approval.
Yeah.
And then long-term, we'll seek to demonstrate this type of data, some powerful data. People on galantamine have been shown to reduce, it's been shown, treatment with galantamine has been shown to reduce the risk of institutionalization or nursing home care by 31% every single year you're on drug. So if you don't take drug, the odds are in 3 years, 70 out of 100 persons would be put into a nursing home because they couldn't take care of themselves. If they took drug, that's only 20%. So you see some amelioration of the symptoms, allowing people to live independently. That saves the system tremendous amounts of money. It provides better life for the patient and certainly those around them. And then the largest study that's been done, you asked early on, does this stop disease? So this is the largest study to date, 40,000 patients out of Sweden, 10-year review of those patients, 5-year follow-up. Galantamine's been shown to have the lowest risk of mortality compared to untreated. It also has had the strongest effect on cognitive decline. So this gets to your question, can this reduce progression of disease? It had the strongest effect in reducing progression of disease versus any of the other drugs in the study. And it had of note, it had the smallest number of patients in the study, probably because of its tolerability issues. So we hope to replicate this with this type of data with a registry post-approval. And that will provide publications for our drug alpha 1062 over time.
On the strong side effects, does everyone suffer from the side effects and just some people are willing to tolerate the side effects, or does it just affect some people and not affect other people?
On multi-dose with galantamine, it affects about half the patients, so 1 out of 2. As you titrate the drug up, increase the dose, so side effects increase for most patients. Okay. And the same is true for the other drugs in the category.
Okay.
So when we launch our drug, we hope to demonstrate these differences. I've talked about them all, so I'll just quickly run through them. Dosing are the first two. So we hope to get to therapeutic dose quickly and be able to add that to our label. Tolerability is a huge advantage for our drug, so we hope to demonstrate reduced GI side effects or placebo-like GI side effects. And then our dual mechanism of action I've talked about, we'll seek to demonstrate that, and then long-term data. Reduction in nursing home requirements, and ultimately reduction in progression to severe disease. Now, a little bit about the market. The Alzheimer's market has had blockbuster after blockbuster. This is an overlay of every drug launch that's taken place in the last 2 decades. And I think of note, you can see most of the drugs achieve 500 million plus in sales, and many of them achieved plus $1 billion in sales. And I think the reason we show this to show, I think it means 2 things for investors. One is there's a need in the class. There's actually a high need in the class for new therapeutic agents. And number 2, there is opportunity because of the rotation of patients from drug to drug, that new drugs can be very, very successful.
Going back to that, there's big drop-offs after with that orange one soon after, and then the blue and the green one. Is that because they went off patent or whatever, and they were bones or whatever, generics out to sort of take market share?
That's exactly what it means.
Okay.
Yep, patent expiration, you'll see the drop-off for every drug.
Gotcha.
Now, if we also look at the market a little more deeply, people ask me often, can Alpha Cognition, if you don't have a partner, could you commercialize the drug? Well, yeah, we could. And here's why. If you look at where the prescriptions are written, there are 11 million prescriptions written each year in this class. 2/3 of those are with neurologists and long-term care providers. So our team has expertise in both, and there's a small number of doctors in both. So these 2 sets of doctors can be covered by about 100 salespeople in the entire United States. So it allows for a very efficient, focused sales force that can drive significant impact across the doctors who are treating these patients. And if you look on the right side, there's 11 million scripts written. Donepezil is the blue, rivastigmine or Exelon is the gray. And then galantamine, you can see its smallest number, probably due to the side effects. But it's interesting to note when you look at the quantitative data, people starting and stopping medication, it doesn't matter what drug they use, they stop drug at the same rate, about 30%. One out of 3 patients are off drug by month 4. And then half are off by end of first year. So people ask, how could you gain share in this market if you commercialize the drug? Well, if you have a 1/3 turnover that quickly and half turnover in a year, and patients are trying 4 different therapies, you need to be next in line as part of the armamentarium of the doctor, and one could be highly successful.
Gotcha. So going back to your, there's neuropsychs, LTC, long-term care. What's PCP?
That's a primary care doctor or internal medicine provider. And they typically will maintain patients on drug after they're started with one of the specialists. In some cases, in more of the rural or secondary markets, they might be the primary provider for the patient.
Okay.
And then here's how we plan to execute our commercialization. Key points of differentiation, I've shown many. We'll exploit the differences with our drug and others. And then we have a beautiful life cycle of new assets that will be forthcoming. I mentioned one, which is memantine alpha 1062 combination, and that will expand market opportunity for the company. We'll target it digitally with doctors, patients. You can do that very efficiently. And I'm always asked, will payers pay for this? The healthcare plans, will they pay for it? We've done 2 sets of market research. The payers told us 3 things in that research. One is this is a low managed class. So they don't actively manage the Alzheimer's class. Number 2, they see need for innovation in the class because the need is so high. And then third, they mentioned, it's most important for evaluation perspective. They said, we will allow a $400 to $600 price if you show differentiation with your compound. So that allows us to be able to quantify how big the opportunity is. And, you know, if you estimate certain types of shares, you can see that this drug could be very, very successful.
When you say a $400 to $600 price, is that per dose? Is that per month or per annual cost, or?
That'd be per month. So yearly costs would be about $4,800 to $7,200.
Gotcha. All right.
And then we're talking to a number of strategic companies, CNS companies, and large global strategics on partnership opportunities. And so there may be an opportunity for us to partner the drug to expand our footprint. But more on that to come.
Yeah.
So in summary, massive market, $5 billion market, high discontinuation. We feel like we've addressed the major issues that doctors tell us are present in the class, which are side effects, switching of drugs, trying to get people to therapeutic dose. Well, we formulate our drug to answer those questions. And then our drug has already demonstrated delayed placement into long-term care, which is meaningful to the healthcare system as a whole. We de-risk our asset in our program. So bioequivalence 505(b)(2), we'll supplement that with patient data to be able to commercialize the asset. And for investors, we have numerous near-term milestones that will be forthcoming early next year through the end of next year.
With the $5 billion in sales at brand price, is that like sort of the value of of what's being sold currently, and you're just saying, okay, that's the size of the market? Or because I would think if you're equivalent and there's no bad side effects, it would actually make the market a lot bigger then, because the guys who dropped off, like the 30% and 50% that drop off, wouldn't drop off. So it would be a 50% drop off every year, and you had it and they didn't drop off, that would double the size of the market, wouldn't it?
We price it or we value the market at scripts, so the 11 million scripts times a branded price. They're not all branded priced today. They're generic priced and in between. So if you take it at a branded price, it offers a $5 billion market. And the reason we do that is as we take share, we will take it in branded price. So it allows you to value the product appropriately. Yeah.
Okay. But your annual doses that would be out there, presuming it all works, would get higher, presumably because people wouldn't drop off. So there'd be more people taking pills.
There should be, yes. And because the drop off so high, if you could tolerate it and it's working, the likelihood that people will stay on drug is much, much higher.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep. Now, I mentioned our pipeline life cycle. This is just a blowout of that. This shows mild all the way to severe disease and how doctors treat patients. They usually start with a single therapy. They'll then switch to another single therapy. They may try a patch after that. Then they move to combination therapy toward the end of disease. Our combination with memantine will allow us to compete right toward the bottom of this treatment armamentarium, in addition to alpha 1062 by itself. That is a 7.7 million script market. It adds another 3 billion in value to the market potential of our compound. So we're pretty excited about that combination product. And then,
I'm not sure if you could go back to that. So on the mild areas, that is where your equivalent drugs are competing at this point, right?
Yeah.
And as they get more, the symptoms get more severe, they get taken off of those drugs and put onto these other ones. Yes. And you're saying that you think because you can do higher doses, that you can get some market share, not from that sort of the mild medium area at sort of the bottom. You can get market share also out of the severe treatment of severe Alzheimer's dementia?
You're correct. So alpha 1062 would play in these first two brain areas, competing against those first three drugs. And alpha 1062 plus memantine would compete in the bottom two brain areas to compete against those drugs. Absolutely. And then our early stage programs, I'm going to spend in the interest of time, most of the time on the 602 asset. So progranulin deficiency has been widely recognized in a number of neurodegenerative disorders. The number of diseases, and I'll use frontotemporal dementia as one of them, ALS is another. Patients who have those diseases have a low amount of progranulin in their brain. So the thought process in frontotemporal dementia is fill it up, and the patient, it potentially could be curative for a patient, allow them to be cured of disease. In ALS, there are 80 to 120% of progranulin. So the thought is if you fill it up or oversaturate the brain, it may restore normal functioning in those patients. And there have been a number of papers written to show that that could be the case. So that's a thesis behind adding progranulin for an ALS patient. Now, our program is a full-length progranulin. It's a chain, a protein chain, has 29 different gems or individual proteins on that full-length chain. And we're exploring full-length for ALS. And then we have a discovery arm in our program where we have taken individual gems, and we'll be analyzing those for efficacy and toxicity. And we hope that we have a new discovery compound that comes out of our early stage work. So that could be a really interesting development for the company, that we may have a new asset that emerges from the study work that we're doing this fall.
All right. And is it a similar platform technology, or is this just another a new molecule that you guys have discovered?
Totally new molecule. It's an AAV vector 9 progranulin compound. So it's the opposite type of program from our 1062. 1062 small molecule, very straightforward development plan. Alpha 602 is a full gene therapy curative program. So very high science, really deep science work that the company's doing. So we've taken the bookends of the type of CNS work you could do in attacking both.
So as it goes through the phase 1, 2, 3, you're going to have to do those big heavy lifting phase 2 and phase 3 trials with a drug like this.
We would. Now, ALS is an orphan disease, so there are about 15,000 patients per year diagnosed with disease. And we have orphan drug designation. So there's probably going to be, we'll know once we have the conversation with the agency, but there could be some accelerated path to approval because the disease is 100% fatal. Yeah. So we'll see what the data shows on our first trial. Our goal is to do a second mammal trial and start that work in 2022. We believe that'll provide a great inflection point for investors in the company, as the other programs that have achieved 2 mammal programs have all partnered or had a research path to partner their assets. So that is a really interesting opportunity for the company.
All right. And could we talk about the mild traumatic brain injury stuff as well?
Yeah. So mild traumatic brain injury, no approved product. It's a really challenging area. There's mild, moderate, and severe traumatic brain injury. So when you think mild traumatic brain injury, you think concussion, or a mild hit or damage to the brain that the person or patient can still function. They're not debilitated. There's no neural separation, but they still suffer from brain inflammation, and they can suffer from something akin to cognitive cloudiness. It occurs with COVID. It also occurs with chemotherapy. And patients will say, I have chemo fog. It's actually a disease, and they can't think straight, and they just walk around this fog. So brain injury persons suffer from same thing. And the thought is that our drug with the alpha-7 nicotinic modulation could clear the cognitive cloudiness. And then our drug has also shown some ability to modulate inflammation. And so we may have a bifurcated dual mechanism approach to solve that in mild traumatic brain injury. Now, a lot of the researchers say, well, why aren't you going after severe? That seems to be more debilitating. The issue for severe and getting a drug approved is severe brain injury often has neural separation. You can't get drug to the brain where it's supposed to work. No drug will work. So we are trying to target an area of brain injury where our drug can actually work.
All right. And where along the development path is the 1062?
So the 1062 for mild traumatic brain injury, this is a preclinical early stage study.
Okay.
Of note, though, it's really interesting about the program. We've already completed the 1A and 1B work. So that work is complete.
So the base safety work has done. It's safe to humans.
Completely done. Okay. So we may be able to accelerate this program to a phase 2 if the data is strong, and we're excited about the results depending on FDA discussion.
What is the broad timeline for, like, let's say, I don't know, it goes accelerated or whatever, but could you give, like, what would you expect for this year, for next year, or the following year? When do we get maybe some key catalysts on that?
Great question. Here they are. So we will have our pivotal trial start this month. It'll complete in the year, initiating the other 2 studies in fourth quarter. We're going to announce top-line results on all 3 programs in Q1 of next year. So MTBI,
for you guys.
Yes, big quarter. Pivotal trial data on AD, and then our 602 data will also be announced. So the first quarter, the biggest quarter of the company's history. We also will announce enrollment of our tolerability trial, and we'll file NDA in early Q3. So we have so many events that are occurring in 2022. And then there are some others that we can't put on a timeline because they're not predictable by quarter that we will be announcing as well. It's going to be a really exciting year for the company.
All right.
And now I'm often asked, can you do it? Well, you can't do it without the right team, but our team has 250 drug approvals, so led by Fred and Colleen. They've approved so many drugs, and about double-digit dozens on 505(b)(2), so they know path to approval. And then Lauren brought in to lead our commercial efforts, 20 years biotech pharma. She launched 15 compounds, about half have been billion-dollar-plus compounds, so she's one of the best marketers in the business, and they're rounded out by Jeremy Dennis and Joe.
All right. And can you give us a bit of a story of where these compounds came from, like the academic side, or is it always you got spun out of any sort of for-profit kind of entities?
So McGill University, we completed the deal for 602. So that was out of a university setting, and we licensed that compound from McGill and then began developing it. Alpha 1062 was licensed from a scientist in Germany. His name is Alfred Minneke. He was a J&J scientist. He actually worked on galantamine back in the mid-2000s, and he worked for several years trying to develop prodrug for galantamine. So it was licensed from Alfred to carry his work forward in the mid-2000s.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah, that's
all right. Oh, okay, cool. In terms of something you got to ask, well, kind of every company, but most especially biotech companies, is, as you said, like phase 3 trials can cost tens of millions of dollars. You've got an accelerated pathway that doesn't seem that expensive. Can you talk about your burn rate, your cash on your balance sheet, that sort of a thing?
Yeah, so we have a slightly under $6 million in cash available to the company. We're burning about $2 a quarter. So really lean burn rate for a biotech pharma company. As you can expect, that burn rate will increase as we get closer to launch. So in mid-2022, you'll see that burn rate start to accelerate as we get nearer toward approval and start developing out our commercial presence.
So you said you've got $6 million cash on the balance sheet, and you're burning $2 million a quarter?
Two a quarter. Mm-hmm.
So you're good. So one would expect you'll get, hopefully, on the back of some good news in Q1 off of those various catalyst points, get some good news and then raise some money on the back of that. Would that be?
I think that's a reasonable expectation. Sure.
Yeah. And are you working on any kind of maybe partnership agreements ahead of time to sort of economically de-risk it, or is it too early still for any sort of licensing or sort of JV type work to be done?
Great question. You know, for I'll start with 602 and then talk about 1062. For 602, we could have partnered this asset multiple times already, but we feel like the real value for our investors is to move through second mammal. So we can efficiently work through our current study, which is already paid for, and our second mammal study to build a bigger inflection point for the company and really reward investors. If you look at the other progranulin assets through second mammal, they've all been sold or partnered from a range of $250 million to $1 billion. So we feel like doing it now is too early. It leaves too much value on the table, and we would like to get through additional data for that program. On the 1062, we're talking to a number of potential partners around the globe, and including the U.S. to determine who and when we partner with. I think the reality is, in this business, you usually see those things take place after seminal data is released and that's de-risked for the partner. So I think one could expect those discussions would accelerate in 2022 after our data release.
All right. And Michael, can you tell us a bit about your background? How did you end up being CEO of Alpha Cognition? What's your background to make sure you get the puck in the net, so to speak?
Sure. 30 years biopharma. I started my career and spent my first 10 years with large pharma, learned the business with Eli Lilly, Pharmacia, Pfizer. My last 20 years have all been startup businesses. So Amylin was one of our startups. We focused on peptides in that company and ultimately drove the company to buy out with AZBMS in late 2010. And then I joined Avenir, and we had as another startup, we had a CNS product for pseudobulbar effect. I led commercial efforts for that company, and we were ultimately purchased by Otsuka for $3.2 billion in 2017 or 2016. And then I joined a third startup, Urovant Sciences, and we actually didn't make it to market. We were purchased by a strategic DSP. And then I spent the last year with a private company. Joined this company in April. It feels like a replay of much of the work I've done for the last 2 decades. The disease state's a little bit different, but the mechanisms and the operational aspects of the business are very similar.
In your roles within these prior companies, was that on sort of the business development management side, or more on the science side, or what's your general area of sort of business, pharmacy, biotech expertise?
Formally, all on the business side. I think in startup, what you see is you end up wearing many hats. Yeah. And that ranges from the deep science side to the regulatory to the commercial, because they ultimately all go hand in hand, and you hire a team with expertise in each of those areas, and the team works together to make good decisions to drive value for the company. So my formal role has always been on the business side, and my activity has spanned the range of all activities that startups need to span to be successful.
All right. Well, that's great. We should wrap it up here. Michael, are there any final comments or your closing comments to sort of knock it out of the park here?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and all those who are listening for taking the time to learn about our company. As I hope it comes out that we're very excited about what we have forthcoming with Alpha Cognition. I think there's a lot to be excited about. I often say, if I encapsulate it, it's an opportunity for biotech returns without biotech risk. Yeah. And then we combine that with some early stage inflection points that could materialize for investors. So a lot to be excited about on our side. We hope everyone listening will follow our story and see us execute really, really well. And we think that will reward all those who are interested in investing in our story.
Okay. All right, Michael, thank you very much. Maybe we'll get you back on the call after in Q1 of next year, after you've got a bunch of that data, and we can review what's been, how things worked out.
Martin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity today, and I look forward to coming back.
Sure. All right, thanks a lot. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.